Hello, good afternoon. The government says the police will be given greater powers to restrict when and where protests can take place by allowing officers to consider the cumulative impact of repeated demonstrations. The move follows frequent pro-Palestine marches in central London. Nearly 500 people were arrested at a demonstration in Trafalgar Square yesterday. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, says she's creating crystal clear guidance for police forces. Here's Alison Earle.
The view from Trafalgar Square on Saturday. Close to 500 pro-Palestine supporters were arrested. The event, 2 days after the deadliest attack on a British synagogue, came despite calls for it to be postponed. But repeated demos like this could be subject to curbs in future under new government powers.
It's important, I think, that we make this change so that the right balance can be struck between allowing people the freedom to protest, which is an ancient freedom in this country, but balancing that against the rights of the wider community to be able to go about their business free from intimidation and fear. Regular protests by often the same group of people, often in the same place. So I want to make explicit in the law that those types of protests with cumulative disruption for communities can attract the same conditions and restrictions that apply to other types of protests.
Some pointing out, though, the new Home Secretary is no stranger to demonstrations herself.
I'm just here, it's Saturday afternoon.
This was her back in 2014, protesting at a Sainsbury's in Birmingham over its selling of goods from Israeli settlements. The government said it happened over a decade ago and has no bearing on the Home Secretary's current role, but ammunition for the Tories who say the Jewish community don't feel supported.
The recognition of Palestine when Hamas still had hostages sent a terrible signal to Jewish people in this country that the government did not care. I want them to know that we care.
But protesters say many have the wrong idea about those demonstrating.
The implication behind their argument is that these are hate marches. They are not. I have, as a Jewish person, I've received nothing but love and respect on these marches, and I've been attending every week for 2 years.
Others believe more legislation just isn't needed.
We don't need additional powers that the police have already been given in recent years. What we need is to think about what communities really, really need, and that is not further restrictions on protest rights.
The government says the new powers will be brought forward as soon as possible as they try to balance the concerns around protests with those who want to make their voices heard. Alison Earle, BBC News.
The Conservative Party conference is getting underway in Manchester, with leader Kemi Badenoch pledging that if her party returns to power, it would deport 150,000 illegal migrants a year. The Tories say they would create a removals force as part of their plan to strengthen Britain's borders, which could also involve leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Harry Farley reports from Manchester.
There's no desire for subtlety at this Conservative conference. The party is announcing combative new policies as it tries to gain attention and fight off rivals on the left and right. But with the party struggling in many opinion polls, plenty are pining over former glory on the 100th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher's birth. Kemi Badenoch hopes her new borders plan can restore that confidence.
Let's stop wasting time. People in our country are suffering and struggling. We are paying more and more money to deal with a problem that is getting worse and worse. We will do whatever it takes.
One challenge is where to send those who come from countries like Afghanistan and Iran.
I'm tired of us asking all of these irrelevant questions about where should they go. They will go back to where they should do or another country, but they should not be here. We need to look after the people in our country.
But it's not irrelevant to say where would they go. That's a
It
fundamentally
is not. It is
question.
The most relevant question is should they be here? If they should not be here, then they need to be removed.
And once you have
the logical conclusion of what you were saying,
say where they would
the logical conclusion of what you're saying is that let's just give up. It's just all too difficult. This is how we've got to this mess.
The Conservatives argue their plan is detailed and thought through, but plenty in her party think the time that's taken has allowed Nigel Farage to cement himself as a rival on the right of British politics.
We need to get our show on the road much sooner than we have. I think there has been a space that's been created that has allowed reform over the recent months to be able to steal that march. What I'm hoping to hear during the conference, and hopefully from Kemi as well, is that reflection and that piece of work that she's been doing over the last 12 months has now happened, and we start to pull our boots up, we pull our socks up, and we start to actually demonstrate to the public that we understand. We start to communicate better.
The hope for those gathering in Manchester is this plan is bold enough to do that. Opponents aren't so sure.
You say bold and I say totally lacking in any credibility whatsoever. These are people that had 14 years to do something about these problems. In fact, these problems grew on their watch.
The test for Kemi Badenoch at this conference is to show that she is changing her party and silence those questioning if she's the right person to do that. Harry Farley, BBC News in Manchester.
In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes continued overnight despite growing optimism surrounding President Trump's peace deal. Israel's Prime Minister says that he hopes to announce the release of all the remaining hostages in the coming days. Hamas has agreed to free the captives in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a ceasefire. But further talks on the way forward are due in Egypt tomorrow. Well, Barbara Pletasha is in Jerusalem for us this lunchtime. Barbara.
Well, we're still hearing about war. Reports coming from Gaza, especially Gaza City, of Israeli airstrikes and tank fire continuing, residential buildings having been destroyed, people being killed. The Hamas-run health ministry says 65 people have been killed over the past 24 hours. And this is despite Mr. Trump's demand that Israel stop the bombing ahead of these negotiations on a ceasefire. And as you said, those talks are set to begin in Egypt tomorrow. They will focus on the technical details of returning all the remaining hostages, because Hamas has agreed to Mr. Trump's proposal that all of them should be released at once rather than in stages, which is what's happened before. And the two parties will also be looking at a map for an Israeli military withdrawal, partial withdrawal from parts of Gaza. And all along, President Trump has been weighing in directly on social media posts. So, for example, last night he said that Israel had agreed on a line for an initial pullback of its troops. And as soon as Hamas accepted that, then there could be an immediate ceasefire and they could go ahead with the exchange of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners. And then that would set the stage for this Israeli military withdrawal, which will happen in phases. And then there would be peace. So a rather simplified take on a very complex issue. And in fact, the extent of the Israeli military withdrawal is one of the most contentious issues amongst many. And in reality, the obstacles that have prevented deals before are still all there. But what's different this time is you have this very personal involvement from President Trump. And that has created a new momentum, an unusual momentum, and hopes that maybe this time there can be a deal.
Barbara, as always, thank you. Barbara Pletasha there in Jerusalem. Police are treating a fire that damaged a mosque in East Sussex last night as a hate crime. The BBC understands that two masked men tried to enter the building in Peacehaven, but it was locked. They then poured liquid near the entrance and on a parked car before setting it alight. No one was injured. More than 30,000 homes in Scotland remain without power on day 3 of Storm Amy. A yellow weather warning remains in place for the east coast, from Glasgow up to Shetland, with the possibility of additional damage to properties and power lines. Some travel disruption is also continuing. ScotRail has said that it will not be operating services on the West Highland Line or Far North Line while storm damage is being repaired. The Prince of Wales's Earthshot Prize will be presented in Rio de Janeiro this year. Prince William says 2025 is a pivotal year for tackling damage to the environment, with 15 finalists selected. Here's our senior royal correspondent, Daniela Ralph.
This year's finalists range from a British start-up business tackling microplastics in oceans to entire countries like Barbados, shortlisted for its global leadership around climate, and Guangzhou in China, which has built one of the world's largest fully electrified transport fleets. Prince William has indicated he would like to take the Earthshot Prize to China in the years ahead.
Soon after we launched the Earthshot Prize.
Making the announcement of this year's finalists, the Prince looked back to 2020, when he launched his 10-year Earthshot project.
Back then, a decade felt a long time. George was 7, Charlotte 5 and Louis 2. The thought of them in 2030 felt a lifetime away. But today, as we stand halfway through this critical decade, 2030 feels very real. The Earthshot Prize was founded because this decade matters. It is the point at which our actions, or lack of them, will have shaped forever the trajectory of our planet.
The Earthshot Prize has travelled. The Princess of Wales joined her husband at the US event in Boston in 2022. Prince William has also taken his Earthshot vision to Singapore in his search for solutions to repair the planet. And last year, Cape Town played host for the prize that is trying to scale up the best environmental innovations.
How important is the Prince William factor in all of this?
Absolutely crucial. He's been able to build an unprecedented network of organizations. The philanthropists we have working together, the corporates that have come together as part of the Earthshot Prize community, the leaders who get involved. There's never been a group of people working together on a single environment project as the way they have with the Earthshot Prize.
Prince William has always described Earthshot as being about urgent optimism and has described the finalists as heroes of our time. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
That's all from me here. I'll be on the BBC News channel from 2 o'clock. The next news here on BBC One is at 5:40 this afternoon. Bye-bye.